So Yannick and I did talked about this topic in the at the Arts Marketing Association conference this summer. We volunteered to talk about it because it was something we wanted to get our heads around back in the spring, about a year ago, I guess. And this was a great opportunity for us as a team to sort of think about what the metaverse can offer the arts sector in particular. So we did that last summer, and really we felt we'd like to bring it back to our own webinar series, and we do these every month, and so booked it in for this slot. Wow, so much has happened since then and now that it feels so different talking about the metaverse. We've had the advent of ChatGPT back in November, and it feels like the big companies are moving their focus to the next new shiny thing, AI, and where does that leave the metaverse? So I'm hoping that we can address that topic today, that idea. And we're going to cover four main things today. We're going to start off talking about what is the metaverse. And HDK ran a survey with its clients and with AMA members last year. So we're going to look at some of the results from that. And then Yannick is going to go in depth a little bit more about the metaverse and what it is. Before I go on, and while you've got the chat box near you, I'd love you to know how many of you were actually at our chat at the AMA. If you were, I would love you to just put an emoji in the chat box just now. It just helps us know whether we need to go over sort of similar ground or whether it's all new people here today. So thank you. Yeah, I can get a feel for that. So great. It feels like there's a lot of you who might not have been. Maybe I should have asked you to put emojis if you hadn't been to the AMA session. But that really helps us. It gives us a sort of a focus as well today. So we're going to talk about, then after that, we're going to pick up on some of the case studies that we touched on in there and how they moved on. And we've got some new case studies for you today. I think it's really important to understand how people are actually working in the metaverse or how they're working towards the metaverse. And then we're going to share some resources that we pulled together. And we've got it on our blog post, and I'll outline what we've got. And then we always like to leave time for discussion at the end. So all of that will take about 45 minutes to an hour, with about half an hour prepared presentation, and we want to leave about 10-15 minutes for discussion at the end. So please stick around for that as well, because I always find those really rewarding, those moments. I think I touched on how things have changed on the metaverse just in 9 months. And I've been working with technology and new technology for 3 decades, I guess, and I've seen a lot of new technology coming into arts marketing over that time. And one of the things I like to talk about is something called the Gartner Hype Cycle. I've used it so many times, I didn't want to use it today, but I have written a blog post on it, and we'll share the links at the end of this session. By the way, if you do have questions, the reason we've asked you to find the chat box is that we just want you to put the questions in as you think of them. We'll try and answer questions as they come along, and then, but we'll try and save them also for the end. So feel free to put your questions while they're fresh in your mind. So yeah, so I talked about the Gartner Hype Cycle. I've got a blog post on it on the website, which we'll link to at the end. And that really talks about how we often have these peaks, what they call peaks of inflated expectation. Just think about what that means at the moment and relate it to things that you know. So AI at the moment, we could argue that that's having a peak of inflated expectations. Suddenly we're talking about all the jobs that are going to be lost due to AI. We're thinking about all the possibilities. We're getting really excited about what it can do, or we're getting really scared. But that's that inflated expectation, perhaps. And then, bit like anything that goes up must come down, we have this trough of disillusionment. Well, we had all that expectation now, and really it's not delivering on what we thought it was. So really, is it going to amount to much? And then we start to get cynical about it. Maybe the metaverse is in that trough of disillusionment at the moment, as we have this new peak with AI. I also have this theory that this cycle happens multiple times for complex technologies as well, like the metaverse, and we'll come back to that later. But I've got a new law to share with you this time for those of you and this is Amara's law. And Amara was someone who worked at Stanford University in the 60s and 70s, and he said, we tend to overestimate the impact of new technology in the short run. We overestimate the impact of new technology in the short run, but we underestimate it in the long run. It's very similar to the Gartner hype cycle. So this idea of, while we're in the moment, it's very hard to predict where these things are going to go. And it's only with hindsight that we really grasp it. But also, so let's have that in mind, have this idea of these cycles with technology. We're not here to predict the future of the metaverse today. We're just here to share some examples. What we did last year to sort of get a flavor of what our peers were thinking about the metaverse, we ran a survey with AMA members and HDK clients, and we asked you, how well do you understand the metaverse? We've got a survey at the end, and I hope you'll fill that out because that will update this question to a certain extent. But the results that we found last summer, were that about 13% of you felt that you really understood what the metaverse is and what it can do and could describe it to others. 47% of you felt that you kind of understood what it was, but maybe couldn't articulate it. And about 40% of you were a little bit unclear about it. We asked you to describe what the metaverse is, or what your feelings to the metaverse was. And we had a range of examples from the cynical to the scared. This one kind of lies in the middle. That this person thought it felt like smoke and mirrors. It only works for the very young. And I'm not sure how much real impact it has. And we had a range of sort of views that echoed that sort of sentiment. What I found interesting was when we asked, what impact do you think the metaverse will have on arts marketing? We got a range of results, but very still undecided. A lot of people in the neutral, not sure area, with only a small amount of people who are negative and a little bit more people who are confident and positive about it. So we were very much uncertain about the metaverse. I suspect we're still as uncertain about the metaverse today. And let's see what we find out in the discussion. And then I had one more question I wanted to share, or two more questions I wanted to share with you. One of them was, what do you see as the largest limitation? I found this really interesting because there were three answers there. I'm just reminding myself. First one is, we don't know how to apply what we do to this new technology. We don't know how to apply what we do to this technology. So that is, how does the metaverse relate to what my daily job is? How can we use it? We think it's too expensive to use now, and we don't think our audience will use it. So imagine an opera company and its audiences, and can you imagine them using the metaverse? Well, let's explore that a bit more later. But those three responses are responses I have seen to very many different technologies that have come out, whether it's the internet when it was back in the 90s, whether it's social media, QR codes, all of those sorts of things have had similar sorts of, not maybe QR codes, have had similar sort of responses. But when we asked, what do you see as the biggest benefit? The biggest response, or that broadening access to the arts, was one of the key benefits of the metaverse. So we'll come back to that as well later, but I want to hand over to Yannick. Yannick, can you tell us a little bit more about what is the metaverse when we talk about it?
Great, thanks, Hans. Yes, so I will talk a little bit now about what the metaverse is and give some examples of some key aspects. When it comes to the metaverse, there are many definitions of the metaverse. It kind of shifts and changes. And there's not one fixed definition, but a lot of the time they share a lot of similar things in their definition. But I think my favorite definition is this one, which is a metaverse is a network of 3D virtual worlds that are focused on social and economic connection. So 3D virtual worlds that are focused on social and economic connection. And it's particularly in arts and audiences, it's the social part that I'm really excited about. To kick off, how do you enter a metaverse space? So there are two main ways of entering a metaverse or the metaverse. So the first one is with goggles, so something like Oculus. And what you do is that you put on the VR goggles and they have a screen in front of them. So in essence, you see a world in front of you and you can move your head around and you will see a virtual world projected in front of you. And this is sometimes the more immersive version, because it's really your body, you're using your body and being physical in the space in order to interact with the space. The other way is that you log in and create an avatar on something like your computer, or maybe on Switch, like a handheld console, and you create an avatar and you see a 3D virtual world, but you see it on a screen and you interact. This one's particularly used at the moment for social interaction because there's already an audience there kind of working with it. I'll give you an example of how the social things is happening in a moment. But I wanted to go into the key aspects that you see in a metaverse space. So there's some things that are shared across the different spaces. So the first one is avatars. There's normally a way of creating an avatar, and this is so that when you're in that space, that's what other people see you as, and it's also what you present as in that space. The next one is communication or interaction. There's normally some sort of way of communicating or interacting. So that could be verbal, like you could have a microphone like this that you're speaking and you're hearing audio. It could be typing on a keyboard and then seeing the text projected. That could also be typing with a joystick, but there's normally some sort of way of communicating and interacting. Interestingly, there are also joysticks, so there are ways of being physical in a space, so you can make your character wave, but that's still where technology is pushing to get more and more physical. To those of you who have some experience in the metaverse, there are suits that you can wear, haptic suits that then allow you to do more things with the body and experience things like vibrations. The next aspect is commerce. So there's normally some sort of exchange of money or items or objects. And this is an image from a system or a game, or I don't think a game is a good description of it, but it's a metaverse space called Decentraland. And this avatar is in an American apparel store, and they can buy different outfits that they can then put on their avatar. So you can imagine that you could be moving through this space, going to different shops. You could even buy a smoothie and be walking through these different places. Commerce is huge. So I do have a statistic. So Second Life is another similar, I believe, sorry, this is Second Life. Second Life is a system, and in 2021, Second Life users cashed out $80 million. So $80 million were cashed out. So they was made from virtual spaces. So it's huge. There's a huge commerce aspect to different metaverse spaces.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about Second Life, some people remember it from, I can't remember, 15 years ago and being on BBC all the time and wondering where has it gone, but it is still around. And I think it's just recently gone mobile as well. So yeah.
Totally. And then the final thing is events. There's normally events happening in that space. That could be, in many cases, that could be games, it could be theatre, and we'll show you some case studies of different events that are happening in art sectors as well. But it's normally some sort of gathering, get together, some sort of going to watch something. This image is from a game called Fortnite, which is a battle royale game. But the music artist Travis Scott held a concert. It was held over five shows over 2 days. So he did 5 shows over 2 days. And I want to show you a video of the event. I think it gives you a scope or a scale of the kind of thing that was happening. I just check, can you hear this?
I made off records I produce. I might take all my exes and put them all in a says I need the boom. About to turn this function into Bonnaroo. Told her hop in, you coming too. In the 305, treat me like I'm Uncle Luke. Have to slap the top off, it's just a roof. She say where we going, I said the moon. We ain't even make it to the room. She thought it was the ocean, it's just a pool. Now I gotta open, it's just a goon.
So each of the avatars there were people that then were experiencing that content, that concert even. It was over 12.3 million players participated, which is just over 600 sold out shows at the O2. So there was a huge engagement. The interesting thing is that in those shows, on a technology perspective, not everybody was in the same space at the same time. What happens is they have a server and they fill as many people as they can, and then they layer the experience on top of each other. So from a technology perspective, a metaverse is if everyone's in the same space. At the moment, we're using clever technology to make it look like everyone's in the same space. And this is where technology for metaverse is currently working. So they're trying to get it so that everyone could be in the same space at the same time. Do you imagine how much energy or computing energy is needed to have 12 million people in one space? It's a lot. So we need to do interesting things, and it's things like quantum computing, and that are these kind of. This is where people are trying to get it to get to this place. So we're not quite at a full true metaverse yet, where you can log into one space and see everyone there. However, people are still using metaverse spaces for social interactions and social events. So metaverse technology, it's in development, it's on its way. It does have some time to go, but metaverse social is already happening. And I think this is the really interesting part for arts and marketing, which we'll go into in the case studies. But referencing on, me and Hans gave a similar talk to this at the AMA last year. We had a look at what's been happening over the past 9 months, and there's been some interesting things to note. We've also shared some in the case studies as well of things that have been happening, but some interesting things outside of the arts. We're seeing a lot of great gaming successes. So there's a lot of games or games makers that are taking their games into VR, or even just making a full VR game. This is a games library, games marketplace called Steam. And this is just a dashboard of all the current VR games they have. So you can see that there's quite a lot on here, and there's a lot of people that are releasing VR games. So there's a lot of innovation going on in terms of what you can do in a VR space. I want to show you another example. This is a game called No Man's Sky, which is a space exploration game. And they extended their game. It used to be something that you control with a controller, but they added a VR element to it. So you can put on goggles and experience space exploration. This is a review, and I just want to show you a clip of it just to give you a sense of the scope.
And in the 30 or so minutes I was given with VR, I was completely blown away by what I was shown. Instantly, the size and scale of the various plants and rocks, and even my ship, left me absolutely floored. The flora, in particular, is what immediately stood out. The galactic vegetation was already sprawling, but now it seemed almost skyscraper-sized. What were once fairly big rocks now stood as mountains in front of me. And that's where it hit me. I've always felt compelled to explore new planets, but now I wanted to see absolutely everything. My hands-on demo, guided by Hello Games' Sean Murray, was more of a quick tour of how each mechanic has changed. If you're familiar with the VR headsets that are currently available, you'll feel right at home. Reaching behind my back to grip and then pull out my multi-tool felt good.
So they've extended what's already there and made a VR element. And you can see it's a really immersive experience that you can go through, and they're looking for innovations like having movement, recognizing movement to pull out gadgets and things like this. Another one is in law. I'm just going to do a little click to see if I can get to the next slide. I may have to just close for a moment and come back on. I'll just check with everyone. Do you see this?
Yeah, that's it, Yannick.
Great. The first court case was heard in the metaverse in Colombia. So in law, in legal, people are trying to see and make it work. And In this case, it's hard to find any images or videos of things that went on. It's mostly people talking about what happened because of the details, the intricacies of law and recording. It has to be done in a certain way. But they heard a court case inside the metaverse. And there's an interesting, the magistrate said something very interesting, and I think I will just read out here. So you need hardware to be able to do this, and that very few people have. And that quite prompts questions about accessibility to justice and equality. They agreed that cost and accessibility need to be discussed, but she advocated for the metaverse in cases of abuse, for example, where participants can share a space without physically having to see each other. So it's really interesting, I find, that other industries are trying. They're seeing where the limits are, but they're seeing where there's possibility and what it can be used for. And I think there's some innovations that are also happening there. So with that, I think it's a great time to kick back into the arts. So I will hand over to Hans to start off with our first case study.
Thanks, Yannick. So yes, I think it's really interesting to see what's happening in other sectors, and partly because I think sometimes funding is difficult in arts and culture, but you've got pop culture end of it, and there's a lot of money behind that. But I was really keen to bring this back to what we can see colleagues, peers doing as well. On our website, on the blog post I put to go with this, we've got our interview with some of our clients back in the summer. So it includes people like Peter from Bath Festival Orchestra. We've got Anting from what was called Chinese Arts Now at that time. But I wanted to find something that was spot on with the metaverse, and I got really excited about our first example, which is Teatro Real in Madrid. It's a big arts venue, particularly opera, and they announced that they were going to do the first opera in the metaverse, and it was going to be on a Spanish platform, and it was, I think, about 2 Fridays ago. Unfortunately, I was traveling back on the train. I couldn't get onto the Wi-Fi, but the next morning I managed to find a small clip, and when I went back to it, it's disappeared. I can't, like Yannick and the court case, it's very hard to find anything online about it, so I couldn't really show you an example of it. What I can show you is the trailer that they made in the lead up to it, and it just shows that I'm not making this up. So it is for Shostakovich's opera The Nose. And yeah, play. So that's so that was the name of the Spanish metaverse platform it was on, but also you had links to their social media. They promote the event, but they don't give links to the event or a recording of the event afterwards, and it was really hard to find. I couldn't find any reviews. I sent my Spanish contact at Asymmetrica to have a look, and he hasn't managed to find anything for me. But what I did see, the little bit I did see, was of very much not a nice, high value, production value stage like you saw in the trailer, but something that was very much what you've been seeing already of what the metaverse might look like with the typical graphics at this time. And you had a singer in the stage, and what you heard was, it was a live audio, clearly, but to like a sort of a 2D avatar, 3D avatar performing it. So it definitely happened. It was definitely the metaverse, and it ticks all of the boxes of our, what we might look for in a case study, but couldn't find a recording or a review about it. But I think that's really interesting, because I think it just emphasizes that this is very experimental in the arts still. We're still finding our feet. It's got a long way to go. Takes us back to what I was talking about, that cycle, that Gartner hype cycle earlier on, where we've had the peak, the trough, and then we have this slow slant as we get used to the technology behind the scenes. So perhaps it was that They wanted to keep it as an experiment, that they want that freedom to be creative with the technology and make mistakes and find where their audience is. So we'll have to watch this space for other operas and that might want to explore the metaverse as well. My next case study is
apologies, I'm just going to have to do this out again, and I will come back in.
Thank you, Yannick.
Thank you.
It's something called HomeX. Now, I mentioned Ann Ting and Chinese Arts Now, who we worked with about a year or so ago on their Temple Place project, which we talk about which we talked about in our presentation in the summer. They have moved forward now with something new. It's called HomeX. I came across it through the Barbican. They sent me an email about it. I booked to experience it, £6, and this was only a few weeks ago. And in doing so, I got a link. I was able to download some software, and then I'll just show you what happened when I went into this area. This is me. I'm sorry, you'll hear my mouse on my noisy desk in the background, possibly. But it shows me as what looks like a sort of a colourful pigeon with a sort of twiggy crown, exploring the space. It's very mythical and magical space. During this time, while we're waiting for everyone to arrive and the performance to start, we were given the opportunity to talk to other people, to understand how we could move about. We did this through our desktop computer. We didn't need a headset for this, and then we learned how to move about, to jump up and down, to send love hearts to other people, all those sorts of things that you might be familiar with if you play any other sort of these sorts of games. And then eventually a performance started. If you want to move on to that, we were taken through a narrative. We were given instructions, a bit like being at a secret cinema experience or something like that. We were given tasks to do. We had to go off and find some seeds and plant them back at the glade, and watch these colourful trees emerge. And then we were introduced, on the next slide, thanks Yannick. On the next slide, we get to see a performance. There were 2 live performances, these characters that we met, Jack and Yang, and they gave a live dance performance, which we could watch while we were doing that. And then we were given more tasks to do. And then the story started getting a little bit darker. We were asked to cut down the trees that we've been planting. We saw new high rises grow. And while we were doing this, we would seem to be in competition with another audience in Hong Kong. So which would the UK audience or the Hong Kong audience could chop down the most trees. And so their story continued. They combined, I guess, there was storytelling, there was gaming, there was a live performance. All of those were sort of merged into this this metaverse-like experience that used a lot of the technology that you get in the metaverse. If you're interested in that, we'll put a link at the end of this, and it's on the blog post, I think, as well, to HomeX. Kakilang is the rebranded company that was Chinese Arts Now, behind this and collaborating with other organizations such as the Barbican as well. So and so that's that case study. Yannick, do you want to share your case study?
Great, thanks, Hans. So my case study is back in AMA, we talked about Metaverse Fashion Week, and it happens every year. So Metaverse Fashion Week is happening again this year. It's actually happening in a few weeks' time. So if you do want to go to it, we will send also links in the chat to where you can sign up and how and where you can download Decentraland. But basically, it's run through a system called Decentraland, which is a metaverse space, very similar to Second Life. And the curatorial theme of this year is future heritage. So a challenge to connect the next generation of creators and traditional fashion designers, showing the potential of fashion to bridge realities and worlds. The event shines a light on the fashion industry of today, proposing a diversity of aesthetics across metaverses, connecting innovation to tradition and looking back to the great moments of fashion to build the future. So it's got an interesting theme, and there are already a lot of events happening. So here's just some of the events that are happening in the metaverse. So you can see there's openings, like opening parties. You can expect music, you can expect avatars all collected together, communicating. There are catwalks, there are presentations of new lines that are coming through. And last year there were lots of interesting, depending on which one you go to, you can there's some that are offering. Last year they were offering that if you buy something in the metaverse space, they will send it to you physically as well. So there's a lot of different interesting things going on, and some of the brands are Adidas, Shell, Roland, Kraken, Tommy Hilfiger, Dolce & Gabbana. So there's a lot going on, and what happens is that there's a whole space that's opened up just for Metaverse Fashion Week, and you can just jump directly to it, and you can go to all these events and different things that are going on. It's a really exciting space for fashion to see how fashion is bridging the gap between Metaverse and reality. We will post links in the chat at the end for if you want to explore a little bit more. And I'll pass you back to Hans.
Okay. So for the last one, it's not technically the metaverse, but it brings together a lot of the immersive technology. And I think, you know, I guess what we have to do as arts organizations and arts and culture is we have to experiment with the technology. And I think that's the lesson I've learned over the years. So I wanted to share an interview that we have done with Tom Rogers, who is a digital creative producer at Birmingham Royal Ballet. I've got a 3-minute extract from the interview I did with him recently. I've got the full 12-minute interview on our website as part of our resources. He was also part of an earlier version interviewed back in the summer. So this is like an update, if you like. So yeah, if we just play that.
So we've got this 3D map of Nutcracker that we're going to explore, turning it into a jigsaw puzzle to explore elements of gamification and revenue streams through that. And then also they're going to turn it into a virtual experience so that you can walk around the set and pick up pieces of the set and move them around. And then within that, we've sort of talked to everyone involved in the production of the Nutcracker, and you'll be able to walk to certain parts of the stage and it will take you somewhere else. So for example, you can walk to the front of the stage and take you down into the orchestra pit, where you'll meet the head of the principal of the orchestra, and also the principal conductor as well, and then head to another part of the stage and talk to our head of production. And then we did an interview with Sir Peter Wright, who created the ballet. So within that space of the set, there'll be areas that you can go off, or there'll be areas that you can interact with the sets as well. So also within that, the augmented pieces of content, pieces that you can move around, we're going to create separate pieces of augmented content that, as a marketing campaign in the run-up to our shows this Christmas, will have maps around the city centre. So a sort of small treasure trail that is 25, an advent calendar basically of Nutcracker, with 25 pieces of our set and our props and our costumes, with text and voiceover as well, to explain what they are and where you'll see them within the production. So that's quite a big thing. I want to call it Nutcracker AR, but I'm getting a bit of resistance. So I think in terms like that, for me, that sort of content is really exciting for two reasons. I mean, our production's 30 years old, and it's become a tradition for people within the Midlands, you know, who to come and see it every year, and they bring their kids and their grandchildren, and it's like, you know, it's one of the reasons I got into ballet. It's one of the reasons I'm here. That's the first ever ballet I saw, and there's a few people who have danced in Birmingham Royal Ballet, and that's the case. So it's sort of quite a treasured production for people within the city. So actually bringing it in a new way and showing it in a new way is not only going to further engage them, but people who have no idea what we do, you know, actually bringing something in the street to them, and they can look at it. You know, we're seen in a different light then, and particularly we're the youngest city in Europe. So actually, this is technology that young people are more likely to engage in. You know, we know that, So it's tapping into that mindset and sort of bringing our production and presenting it in a way that appeals to them and makes us accessible.
Great. So that was Tom. Now I did spot in the who's joined us today that we've got Imogen from Birmingham Royal Ballet. Imogen, are you okay just switching your mic on and maybe just giving your view or your sort of what you understand about this? I was really interested to hear that Tom emphasized the sort of accessibility thing, which is I sort of echoed my point earlier on there. I'm also interested in what the plans are for, you know, he talked about the sort of the bit around the city. What's, you know, what have you experienced as part of some of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really exciting working on this project. And I think for me, a big part of Birmingham Royal Ballet is that we're a touring company. We bring the ballet to people. That's kind of our ethos. And using this kind of technology, I think you also mentioned this thing about the court case, about people being able to share a space who might not usually be able to actually share a space effectively. And I think some of the things that I'm really excited about is kind of taking this kind of stuff around Birmingham, but further afield, so that, you know, taking it into kind of special needs schools so that they can, you know, really engage with the content, being able to, you know, be a bit more tactile with our productions, and being able to enjoy the ballet, but still without having a kind of, I don't know, those kind of social cues of, you know, not being able to go into a theatre because they can't behave in that kind of space, but still being able to enjoy the kind of arts and culture that we have. So I think that's what really excites me about this kind of project.
Brilliant. Thank you for that insight, Imogen, and thank you for letting me put you on the spot just then. So yeah. Great, thank you. So we are coming to the end of our prepared bit. My last slide here is just to recap some of the resources that we've got. We're going to put the link in the chat at the very end, but also on a lot of our slides, you've got our website address at the bottom, so you can just go to the website, go to the blogs. You'll see the one on the, I think it's probably the most recent one at the moment, the one on the metaverse. It has links to previous blog posts on the metaverse. We have that longer interview with Tom that I mentioned, plus some of the other interviews we've got. We've got the full survey results that we shared back in the summer. We've got a checklist for anyone who wants to explore, take their own journey to the metaverse. I think there's a kind of checklist blog post or download of things to help you, you know, what you could be doing, what you could be listening to, what you might want to try. So it sort of takes you step by step to immerse yourself, if you like, in the metaverse.
We had a couple of questions. I'll kick off with one of them. I saw about beacon technologies. I'm just going to look for the, do you know if beacon technologies are still developing and how they might work with the metaverse? And that's from Tandine Byrne. As I understand, beacon technologies are about your phone, like being able to send and receive messages from your phone. And I think what I understand in the metaverse is that it's about locating you within a room. So if you were to, for example, move through a shopping center, how does the metaverse know that you're in there, and are you able to send and receive messages? I know that there's a lot of interesting stuff being done with watches, like smartwatches, being able to locate that you're entering a room to be able to turn on lights, for example. So I'm assuming that that kind of messaging is going to be put into the metaverse. But in terms of locating yourself in the metaverse, at the moment that you either have cameras at the edge of the room, or you that locate you in the room, or you have other ways, like you normally have like a stage manager watching the space, and then when someone enters a room, they send a message. It's kind of a manual because it's it's more difficult to get the automatic, but organizations like Punchdrunk I know are doing some interesting things with haptic feedback gear, and I'm assuming they're the people that are going to be looking as well at locating people within a room and sending specific messages at that point.
Okay. Thank you, Yannick. I see, Laura, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'd love to hear yours or anyone else on the course thoughts about how this might be used in live theatre performance. Obviously, there's a lot there in what Birmingham Royal Ballet have done about touring sets, and you mentioned having the little bit of the performance of the two dancers. But yeah, I suppose I'm associating it a little bit with everything that's gone off with live screenings of performances, and yet what this seems to offer is something way beyond that. So yeah, just to sort of riff on that a little bit. Thank you.
I think that's a great question, Laura. I'm really happy that you asked that. I don't want to dive in with my thoughts. I'd just like to see if there's somebody else in the room who's got sort of anything to add to that on that theme.
Hi. I'm currently working at Chichester Festival Theatre, and I'm the youth. Hello. I'll turn the camera on. Might as well. The lovely foyer. So we are currently, I'm the Youth and Outreach trainee, and I'm currently working on a project that's going to culminate on the 14th of April, where we're using Unity and volumetric capture and motion capture. And the idea at the moment, because it's very much an R&D project, and we're using only young people in the area, and we're teaching young people in the area how to use Unity as well. At the moment, the sort of thought is that we would project those assets and find interesting ways to come in and out of those assets.
Sorry, can I take you back a bit? Could you just explain what projecting the assets means?
So for example, so you would make what they call a pre-baked scene in a Unity sequencer. So you would have just a cinematic sequence made with animation. So it's pretty much like a film. But because it's so hyper realistic, our hope is that we will eventually be able to create some crossover between the digital and the live theatre world. But it's been a crazy challenge because obviously being an R&D, the resources are limited, and generally with this technology, you have to be really resourceful if you don't want to break the bank.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for that insight. That was really useful. I'm going to just quickly pick up on a couple of things. You mentioned break the bank, and I saw a question about funding. And I mean, I don't know, but obviously Bloomberg's BRB just tie up the fact that Tom was talking about Bloomberg as part getting funding from there for the work that they were doing. Yeah, I was going to say something else, but it's gone. There's another question here that I just saw, I think. Where do you start in terms of no, that wasn't the one.
I see one from Catherine Conisby. Coming from a non-technical background, it feels like there's a bit of a barrier in terms of where to start with this kind of thing. Do you have any tips? We put together what do we call it? We call it Voyage into the Metaverse, like a checklist of how to get yourself acquainted with the metaverse. That's part of the resources pack that we sent out. But it's things like downloading Second Life and starting an avatar, reading articles, these kind of articles. It's just how do you make yourself familiar with something? And it's like bit by bit you get used to it. So things like going into a cold shower, it's difficult to jump in straight away, but if you put your hands in and then you put the next bit in, then it's not so shocking or maybe traumatic when you get to the full version. And I think that's a lot in our resource pack.
Catherine, I see your hand up.
Hi, yeah, thank you. And I think that's a really good point. I guess the other thing I'm thinking is in terms of so many of the examples, there was clearly like a team that was working on building the space, building the assets, and without having a kind of off-the-shelf kind of third-party thing that you can essentially adapt, or with graphic design you can use something like Canva and you've got all the assets there, and someone who knows nothing can have a go. I guess it's a question too of whether there are things that could be repurposed and adapted for your organization, particularly, you know, if you've got lots of part-timers, lots of volunteers, you know, very little resource in terms of capacity, or a short funded project. There's no way you're going to be able to teach yourself to sort of do the back end coding, right? So it's sort of seeing if there's something that's essentially like a shortcut. If you're aware of anything like that, that would be great if you could speak to that as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great question. I think we're in an interesting point of the metaverse, and I think this was also raised at the AMA as well, as there is a bit of a startup. You need to have some sort of equipment, you need to have some sort of knowledge. How do we get involved in that? I think so there was another question about who do we watch for metaverse spaces? And I think both of these tie in together. The big companies are putting a lot of money into it, and normally what happens is it spills over. So people like Facebook and PlayStation, Sony are putting a lot of money into the metaverse. So then what happens is that they create stuff, but then they want people to use, because they want people to get excited, they want people to buy more. And what happens is that stuff normally has free versions of things that you can use. So for example, you can, you know, if you want to do completely custom built something, then you need a lot of stuff to be able to do that. You need to have a team, as you said, Catherine. However, you can just enter these spaces and you can normally set up your own room. For example, Horizon Worlds, which is Meta, their idea is that you can use office spaces. So you can set up your own office space. I mean, you don't have to call it an office space, you know, you can call it whatever it is, but you can run stuff there. So there are free softwares that allow you to experience the metaverse. It just that then dramaturgically for the performance itself, we just need to make sure that when we talk to our audience, when we talk to people, that they know what they're entering, to make sure that it is an experience that they go through. So I would say that there's free options, there's free versions of stuff that we can use, and then as we begin to work out what's working, what's not working, we just do that more, and we can open up where we actually want the customization.
And also, I mean, I think, and Tom touched on this in his interview, I think this, you know, as we are often working in very creative things that other companies want to partner with to show off their technology as well. And I think we managed to get our office created in the metaverse for free last summer. So we had we could demonstrate a space that people could come to. And Tom was talking about the pricing being around that idea that people want to work with the arts and culture to show off their technology. So hopefully there are, if you find the right partner, there are opportunities there as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we also have done a partnership with Canon as well, which has made a big difference to us and what we can do in-house. And just having their expertise in certain like kit and how to do things has been amazing. And yeah, I think it's worthwhile reaching out to different companies if you see kind of that they've launched something new. That yeah, just the knowledge aspect can be super helpful.
And Anastasia, I see in the chat that you mentioned ChatGPT and AI, and just what the potential for that is to make access to the metaverse and technology more available over the coming months and years as well. So I think that the two coming together is going to be really interesting as well. Okay. Annika, is there anything else we want to pick out just now? I'm conscious of the time as well. I'll just read Maria. Cultural institutions previously used Google Earth technology. I can mark Quest strategy employed. What form of payments and expenses will it be for cultural institutions and cultural actors? Cyber activism on online subscriptions, if equipment expenses are not allowed. Maria, do you want to explore that a little bit more? Are you happy to put your microphone on, and because you've obviously got some clear ideas of where that question has come from? Don't worry if you don't want to.
Hello.
Hello, Maria. Thank you.
This question is brought from grant application. There are some strict terms and conditions that equipment is not allowed, or software purchases are also not allowed. So my question, how I will mark or write about this sort of expenses? It is subscription or trial versions, or I would like to learn more about this technology. That's why I ask for financial support, or that's why I explain my interest in this equipment or in this new launch release from Meta platform, because we have like each month or 1/2 a year a new release of new software. So I also have to explain that I'm just a user of this technology.
Yes, it's I suppose it depends. It sounds to me like R&D, research and development.
Because I can also can explain that I'm the participant of A or I machine learning. So I train my servers located in Ukraine or located somewhere in Scandinavia, you know, so, or I'm a user of technology, or I'm a participant of this AI machine learning process launched by diverse corporations worldwide. So my question, how will I explain my role in this cultural process and technological as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's what sort of language do we use, what sort of terminology, and I think it's really important, especially in arts marketing, the language that we use, that we make sure that we make it clear what the experience is so that people know what they're coming to. And I think we saw that a lot in the pandemic when people were streaming live, or it was a pre-recorded video that was shown, and just the difference in language between by live and pre-record needed to be changed, and then we needed to, and then it made it more obvious to people what they were coming to experience. Is it something that was live being streamed right now, or it's something that's more pre-recorded? So I would say that there's something about R&D, research and development, that there may be, as in, like, we don't know what the outcome of certain ventures are, but we are looking for exploration. That could be one way. Another way could be that you do look for a specific endpoint. We would like to research this specific software product, and this is the kind of budget that we may need for those kind of things. The other way it could be, I'm not sure, but there could be a way of creating a project and then keeping the hardware that you have from that project to continue R&D. Does this kind of help, Maria? Is this the kind of answer?
Yes, it is answer, because we have also like another line of jurisdictional process of what is metaverse, what is A, and what is a copyright, because it was Creative Commons before, and now the new jurisdiction and new law underline that the author has the right from even text to image prompt. I don't know how to make the copyright for this, or to have my personal signature for the text to image prompt that I have developed. So metaverse, yes, it is a question, and it is the answer that for the East Europe it will be research, I think, research study. Thanks a lot.
Great. Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of moving parts, and I think that's the part that can sometimes seem daunting, but I think it sometimes, my experience has been that when we have a specific thing we want to do, it's easier to then do it. For example, when it's open possibility, we'd like to do anything in the metaverse. There's so many different, for example, as you were bringing up, Maria, copywriting, where do we get things? But when you say, I would like to do an event this Sunday, and I want to bring 20 people, then to answer that question, it kind of hones in what needs to be, it kind of helps to make it so that you just ask the questions, because there's kind of endless questions that you can ask about it. For example, I see someone asking about safeguarding. So how do we safeguard will be important if your audience is younger. To answer your question, Owen, it's something that's really it's a really important talking point about the metaverse, and there are a lot of people talking about it. In general, I think the way that safeguarding has been happening is that we don't, what I've seen is that they don't open spaces to people without tickets. And that way you control everybody that's in the space that has a ticket. Or even a step further, you have a room or a place where people put the hardware on, so you can control who's going in and out of the room, or who has the hardware on. These are two ways of safeguarding, but at the moment there's a lot of stuff going on, and you can set limits in the technology so that it doesn't allow people to kind of interact with you or block you from getting too close. For example, I'm just going to move closer to the camera. You can experience this in VR sometimes, where someone's in your face, which can be quite intrusive. So you can set limits where people don't, and you can set limits of communication where people are not allowed to communicate with each other. So it's these kind of things that I use as safeguarding.
I just want to thank you for that, and that was that led to a really good discussion. I'm aware of two hands up. I saw Owen's hand up, but you've taken it down now, Owen. So I didn't know if you wanted to come back on what Yannick was saying. I'm just going to say, people, I realised I thought we were brilliantly on time, and now we've just gone over time. So don't feel rude if you have to run. I completely understand. But maybe we can just, if Owen did want to come back, otherwise I'd just like to, Lyndon to have the opportunity, because Lyndon's got the hand up. Owen, did you want to say anything more?
Yeah, I was just briefly going to say, obviously, I understand everything you're saying. One concern would be if we were to do like an open event, for example, even if people are registering for tickets, how do you even know that it's them who are registering for the tickets? And I've got a younger sister. I remember playing Roblox online with her, and then there was a really dodgy older man like talking to her, and she wasn't even aware that was what was happening. So yeah, but that's an open discussion to have later. And it's interesting to hear how people are navigating it. But yeah, we can move on to Lyndon. But thank you for your thoughts.
Great, thank you, Owen. And Lyndon, do you want to say something? No. No.
I see you've unmuted, Lyndon, but we can't hear you if you are speaking.
Okay, then. Do you want to? Yeah. Who else can we follow? Who else are leading in the space? Good question.
There's a few case studies that we've shown of people. I think also someone posted in the chat today about some things that are happening. I'd say for the big technology movements, I would follow the big players and then have a look at what the medium to small players are doing with that technology. In terms of arts leaders, we've put a couple of case studies as well, but there may be people local to you, but some other ones, Afe are another company that are doing things. There are some interesting companies that are around Punch Drunk as well that are doing different things with accessible, immersive performances. There are a lot of interesting things going on in music as well. And there are some really interesting things going on in film. So I'd say these are the kind of places, depending on what's your most interesting. I think our resources pack will give a couple of ways of finding out more and seeing where to go from there.
There's a great intro podcast series from Bloomberg, actually, I think, that sort of really helps you get deep into the themes around the metaverse as well. And Lyndon, you ask about demographics. It's a really good question. I don't think you'll be surprised to, I think we probably guess where a lot of it comes from, particularly from gaming as well. So it is definitely that younger demographics, but don't just take that as the obvious thing that it is spreading out. There are people of different ages trying out the metaverse and testing it, but it's still very much the core sort of people are sort of the younger demographics, the people who like gaming as well. With that, I see there's other questions. What we'll do is we'll go through any questions we've missed. We'll try and add them to the transcript or to the write-up of the webinar and put those on the website as well. I think we usually email out to all the people who've joined when the recording is online. So do feel free to share that with your peers and colleagues as well. And we hope to see you at a future webinar. Thank you very much for joining us.